everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and right over there is Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Nikki, it's back to school season.
I know.
It is unreal to me. I feel like we just started celebrating summer.
Well, we did. I'm not quite ready. I'm excited about this show, but then I'm also like, oh man, I have to really start thinking about some stuff.
Right. This is, I think, our fifth back to school season on this show, and it hasn't gotten any easier. If it hasn't hit your community yet, it's coming, and that means it's time to evaluate your strategies as a parent in helping your kids manage their ADHD in the classroom and beyond. But before we dig in, head over to TakeControlADHD.com, get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website, or subscribe to our mailing list, and just right on the homepage, just click that little button and join the mailing list. We'll send you an email every time the latest episode goes live each week. You can always connect with us on Twitter and Facebook at Take Control ADHD. Call us and leave us a voicemail. You'd love to get your voice on the show, 503-664-4ADD. And finally, the biggest news yet, don't forget, it's open enrollment season for Nikki's small group coaching beginning next month. So if you haven't put your name on the list, it's not too late. But it's getting perilously close to too late. TakeControlADHD.com. Sign up and check out Nikki's other powerful online trainings there as well. Elaine Taylor-Klaus is co-founder for ImpactADHD and is a coach behind tools and resources dedicated to parents of kids with ADHD. She is, as you might expect, parent to a child with ADHD herself, but like so many of us, she was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult herself, and she's a teacher, so she brings with her the perfect perspective on life and living with ADHD that is critical to any discussion that targets practical tools to help parents help kids while keeping themselves cool in the process. Elaine is one half of the duo at Impact ADHD with Diane Dempster, who couldn't be with us today, so Diane's role will be played by Elaine as well. Elaine, welcome to the ADHD podcast.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here.
Welcome. Well, we are thrilled to have you here. As we said, back to school, it's a busy season. I'm sure it's very busy over at Impact ADHD.
Yeah, you might call it our busy season.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I love your website. It is filled with so much information, so many resources. It's fantastic. So if people haven't checked it out yet, they definitely need to. So today we're going to talk about back to school. We don't have a real agenda. I just want to pick your brain.
Awesome.
Well,
I'm laughing because, here I live in Georgia and most of the schools are already back to school. They've already started.
Yeah, we're on the delayed side. We've got weeks yet.
Well, we noticed this summer that we have clients all over the country. So from the time they stop to the time they start, and then in other parts of the world, there's only about 4 weeks in the summer that our clients are really out of school.
Oh, that's interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah, we don't start until after Labor Day, so it's the first week of September.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
See, that's why I'm torn. That's why I'm like, okay, I really want to do this, but gosh, that means that I have to start getting organized and thinking about back to school, and that I'm just not quite there yet.
Not there. My kids are still at camp, for crying out loud. We still have a vacation left.
Wow.
Crazy.
I'm jealous.
Crazy. Well, I'm curious, that when I had actually reached out to you guys to be on the show, one of the topics that came back was the back to school with ADHD. What's the parent's real job? And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, that really sparks my curiosity. Am I doing it right? What is our job when it comes to back to school?
That's what this whole show is about, is actually just cementing whether or not we're okay.
Are we good parents?
Yeah, are we good parents? So if you could help that.
So the short answer is yes, you're doing great, right?
Thank you.
If you're having this conversation, believe me, you're a step ahead of most, so you're good. It's an interesting, the whole idea of what's our job, the notion that there is a job for us. And I think, when we were kids, our parents' job was to send us off to school.
Right.
That was pretty much it. Which meant a lot of us did go undiagnosed and unrecognized and through the years and sort of went under the radar, which was not always so good for us. But nowadays, the parent's job is very different. and navigating the nuances of that, I think, is really complicated.
So where do you start when you're sitting down having a conversation with somebody who's really struggling? What does that look like? I mean, do you have like a regimen that you look at when you help parents to rationalize what is their role going forward when school starts?
Well, we have a methodology that we teach parents that's called the coach approach. And we do have a model that we teach, and we teach a program called Sanity School, which is really awesome, that sort of gives parents a context and a framework. So the first place I think we often want to start with is understanding what our role is. Like, what are we bringing to the dynamic in the first place? And so it's often starting by getting a sense of where the parent is in the process. Is the parent very hands-off, maybe too much so? Is the parent very hands-on, maybe too much so? Often what we see is the parents bringing her or his own anxiety to the dynamic in a way that then sort of amps it up for the kids.
I feel like you're in my house.
Well, I'm going to say that's me. Hello. I'm sure I do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
particularly these big transitions. I've got a 14-year-old who's starting high school next year. I'm a hot mess. Like, it's all I can. I'm practically. I just can't even look at her because I'm afraid I'll vomit all over her right now because I'm so anxiety ridden.
Well, and I do think that teenagers get a bad rap. So I just want to say that just because you got a teenager coming, that doesn't mean it gets bad.
True.
I think they get a lot more interesting as human beings, and so a lot of the process here is about sort of calming our own anxieties and our own fears and concerns, and realizing that our job is to slowly but surely pass the responsibility for their work and their success from us to them. And when they're really little, it's our job to direct, right? We have to tell them, it's time to do your homework, it's time to go to sleep. But as they get older, it's really our job to help them begin to assume those responsibilities for themselves. And I know that when we're dealing with an ADHD population, we think, well, but my kid can't. And in some ways that's true. And we still want to begin to look for the little ways that we can pass the baton and let them have it and grab it and hold it and run with it and find success with it. One challenge, one opportunity, one responsibility at a time. And I know that's theoretical, but it's really how it works.
Well, you just made a connection for me that I think is really important. I want to reflect it a little bit. I feel like the anxiety that I have is not because I'm terrified of having a teenager. It's because I'm terrified of the memory of my experience as a teenager, right? And because I was a basket case in, starting high school, it's not fair to me to inflict that basket casedness onto my daughter, who is actually really quite level-headed, although struggling with ADHD. I should not even say struggling. She's living with ADHD. There is a whole new set of sort of things to think about in terms of what are her responsibilities for care and feeding of herself as she continues to grow. I need to let go of that as her parent, riddled with anxiety that comes from me as a youth. And let her have her own experience. And that's really hard to do. And I wonder if that's a thing that, please tell me I'm not alone.
You are so not alone. Well, and more than likely, for our generation, you were in high school managing, not understanding that you had ADHD.
Well, I was unsupervised at best.
Right. Even if you were diagnosed, you weren't really being well treated because what we know in the last 10 years is, heads and shoulders above what we knew 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
So I love the way you shifted that, because our kids are learning to live with ADHD, and our job is to help them understand themselves and learn to live with and manage themselves. Mm-hmm. And that means stepping out of that need that we have to make sure it's going to be okay and to do it for them. Which is one role that we tend to do, is to overcommit, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? Right. And recognize that, they're going to falter a little bit as they figure it out. But if we don't give them the chance to figure it out, they're never going to figure it out. So that's one side of the coin. And then the other side of the coin is the parents who are like, well, I tried. She said she's got it. She doesn't got it. I can't do anything about it. Those are the parents who throw up their hands and give up.
Sure.
Which is also not, that's letting go too much. So the challenge is to let go consciously, systematically, strategically, if you will. And it's an art. It's definitely more art than science.
Oh, for sure. But one of the things that I liked that you said earlier was that it's really overcoming one challenge at a time and being successful at that, rather than trying to get your whole morning routine, in place. Maybe it's just getting up on time, or maybe it's just making sure that you take your medication. Maybe, just really kind of breaking it down into little successes, which I would guess has got to be a lot less overwhelming for the child or for the student.
Exactly. I mean, there are two things. One is it's less overwhelming. The other is the solutions are in the successes. Right. So when you help a child find a little success, maybe it's waking up, maybe it's brushing your teeth, maybe it's turning in a homework assignment or getting started, whatever the one place where you're taking aim and focusing, and then we call it taking aim. When they find success in that, the success breeds success. Then they feel like, okay, I can accomplish something, and they're willing to take on something else. Mm-hmm. And then they can look to what worked there and go, okay, that worked. How can I apply that to something else? So it's really that's the place to look. And we have this tendency to look at our kid and say, well, that didn't work, and that's not doing, you're not doing that, and you're not doing that. And what they really need to hear from us is, wow, you didn't take the bait when your brother poked you. You did a great job keeping your temper.
Mm. Wow. Recognizing the positive, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I have a question about the balance, right, between letting it all go and still being somewhat there as a guide, or as a I don't want to say leader, because that's not really right, but just still being involved, right, in their school life. How do you do that? Like, for example, what comes to mind is, say that somebody or a student did their homework, but they left it. Okay, so they intentionally didn't leave it on purpose. It was just something that they forgot and they didn't pack it up. So do you, as a parent, go ahead and give that assignment and take it to the school, or do you let them learn that lesson the hard way? Like,
it's a great question, and you may not like my answer.
I can already tell I'm not going to like it.
But bear with me for a minute, because the answer is it depends, right? Mm-hmm. So it depends on a few things. It depends on where that child is developmentally, right? So where, are you dealing with a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old? Are you dealing with a child who's who it was all he could do to get his homework done in the first place? Or are you dealing with a kid who, isn't really trying to pay attention? I mean, there's a lot of nuances there. So part of that answer is about understanding and setting realistic expectations for a particular child. And we do a lot of work with part of our model is about setting realistic expectations, or shifting expectations to meet the child where they are. Mm-hmm. Not lowering them, but meeting them where they are and inviting them to grow from there. So that's part of how you determine the answer to that. The other is to ask, is this what this child's working on or not? So if what this kid you've been taking aim on is turning the homework in, then it may be more instructive for the child not to have it turned in, so that they can learn from the experience. But if you've been really working on getting started and completing the homework, and that night that just didn't get put that in the backpack, but he did everything else, then you might want to take it in so that he's not suffering when he's actually really been successful and he's done a lot of work to be successful. So we want to make those decisions. We talk a lot about flexible structure. And we want to have structures in place, but we need to have some flexibility with them, like a bridge needs to be able to move, right? Or a building needs to be able to move. We need some flexibility so that we can help that kid learn from their successes, instead of just constantly, no matter what happens, they're always going to feel like a failure. It's never going to work.
This is one that I'm thinking about a lot right now, because to me, it comes down in many ways to a question of advocacy and how well we are teaching our kids to take responsibility to advocate for themselves, right? If in this example of homework, if my child has an expectation that I will always rescue them, then I haven't done a good job of setting the expectation of advocacy. If the child forgets the homework and says to the teacher, I forgot my homework, can I call my dad and ask for a favor? Dad, please, I forgot this. I know I did this. Can you help me? Of course, I'm going to drop whatever I can and help out. There's a nuance to that for the responsibility to actually, make something right and not, know what the pain looks like and advocate for yourself. And that's kind of what I'm working toward. I think. Well, and
it's what you're pointing to. We call it asking for help, is teaching our kids that it's not only is it okay to make mistakes, but they're gonna make mistakes. Right. So expect that. That's part of being human, and to own it and learn how to manage it and deal with it and advocate for yourself, as you say. And that's an enormous part of helping our kids be successful at school, is to have them be able to do just what you said. Now if your child was not in a condition where they were sort of expecting you to just rescue them every time, that's a whole different scenario than how I did all of these things, but I dropped the ball right here. Can you help me? And then it gives you an opportunity to have a conversation with her, and we call it failing forward. Later, where you sit down and say, okay, what worked? You always focus on the positive first. Now, what didn't work? What would you do differently next time? So that they can learn from the mistake and use that as a constructive way to improve, instead of just feeling like no matter what they can do, it's never good enough.
Well, I have to tell you, Elaine, I love your answer. I absolutely love it. And I'll tell you why. And it's probably coming from my own fear as a parent, being judged by others. Mm-hmm. But I think that your answer, it gives us that flexibility to really look at the situation and look at our own children as who they are. Yes. And it takes the pressure off of what you think is the right thing to do. Because if I was to talk to my parents, a different generation, and say, okay, he forgot his homework, they're going to say, well, he needs to learn from this.
Needs to learn. Yeah. But how does he need to learn from it? How can you really help him learn from it is the key.
Absolutely. And I love the point that you bring up of, what if what he was working on was just finishing it and he did that? That's the success. And that's what we need to recognize. And so I'm very pleased with that answer. And it takes the pressure off me a little bit as a parent.
Well, Diane has this framework she taught me that we teach about the parent roles. And there's sort of 4 different places where the parents' roles. So when the kids are little, we start by motivating them and directing their effort, right? Directing their work and motivating their effort. And then as they get a little older or more mature, and don't confuse age with maturity with ADHD kids, then we want to start motivating their ownership and modeling the organization for them. And then the next step is to begin to transfer the ownership and support their organizational efforts. And then the last step is to empower them and champion them and troubleshoot as they're sort of leading their life. And those are sort of your 4 stages over the course of their academic career, if you will. So you're not going to hit phase 4 till probably late high school or college for most of our kids.
Right.
And so most of our kids, we spend, if we're lucky in high school, the parents who are really owning their responsibilities well and have transferred it well are really in a support role by high school. Mm-hmm. And that's where we want to be. And there are going to be some areas where we can be that more than others. And we may still be not directing, but modeling some of it while we're helping them take on the ownership. It's again, as you say, it's very nuanced. And it's very individual. And the idea is to meet your child where he or she is, wherever they are, and help them continue to grow from there and learn to own their stuff. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is raise adults.
Mm-hmm. With most of the people that, our audience, thinking about our core audience, the people who write us are people who are living with ADHD themselves. And right. There are, and I'm going to speak, personally right now, it is very challenging. It was certainly when I was diagnosed, it was very challenging to put a framework into place to live my own life and figure out how to meet my own responsibilities. Mm-hmm. That it would have been ridiculous for me to imagine trying to help build a framework for my child with ADHD. I've put a number of systems in place, and I've learned a lot over the last decade to be able to figure that out. But it was a process that was fraught with dangers. There be monsters here, and it took a decade.
Right.
In your work with folks in this situation, how do you grease the skids? What do parents with ADHD, what opportunities do they have to learn from their kids going through this process?
Well, a lot of the parents, I would say that in our community, about half the parents that work with us in all of our various programs have ADHD themselves, or some, related issues, and a lot of anxiety, a lot of learning issues, dyslexia, et cetera. And then about half of them don't. And for those who do, a lot of them figure it out like I did, and like many of us, because their kids are diagnosed, and they start to sort of read about their kid, and they go, wow, this sounds like me, right? And so that's pretty common. And then the challenge is to help the adults with ADHD understand that by managing your own ADHD, that's what's going to enable you to help your child. It's what's going to model for your child. It's going to be what helps you connect with and improve your relationship with your child. I was literally just on the phone with a client right before we spoke, and that was sort of my call to her. My call to action for her was, we've been doing this for a while, and the truth is, I want you to take a deep breath and realize that we really need to focus on helping you manage your ADHD. Because that in her dynamic, that's what was really interfering with her relationship with her son.
And that's an incredibly difficult thing to hear.
It is. Yeah. It is. And you have to be in a trusting relationship and, a supportive environment to be able to hear it. So, and I give her a lot of kudos for being able to hear it. Right.
Yeah.
Cause it's not easy. And, there are plenty of parents who are like, it's not about me. I don't want to hear about me. I want you to fix my kid. And the truth is, whether you as an adult have ADHD or not, 90% of the challenge is in how we approach raising these complicated kids. And when we understand what we're bringing to the dynamic, we understand what they're bringing to the dynamic, and where the neurology is in all of that.
Right.
That's at the core of really getting clear on what our roles and responsibilities are. It's sophisticated stuff. It's hard.
Yeah. It is. And I have a question about how to work with teachers then, because obviously they have to be part of this circle, right? They have to be, I would guess they need to be communicating with the child, with the parents. What suggestions do you have about that, working with teachers and making sure that your student has what they need?
It's such a great opportunity, because you as a teacher, what is, if you
actually,
put that...
I was going to say, I'm not a teacher. Yeah. I'm an educator.
Okay.
So I'm an adult educator. I've not taught kids in a classroom in decades. So I don't see myself as a teacher in that capacity.
Well, I'm going to hang my hat on that anyway. If you put that role on,
yes,
what is your expectation of how parents can best work with caregivers?
So the first thing that we try to help parents understand is that more than likely they are as well informed, if not better informed, than their child's teacher. And I don't say that to dismiss teachers. I say that because teachers are just woefully uneducated around ADHD in particular, and other aspects of learning disabilities. And it's so sad and difficult and frustrating, because they want to help these kids, but the schools don't have the capacity to do the kind of in-service training that they really need to understand it well. So they get the cursory understanding, they get the bullet points, they get, use a reward chart, they get what they see in the IEPs and the 504s. But oftentimes the teachers don't really understand that, the emotional impact, or the sensory impact, or, we still are hearing from teachers, why can't he just? Yeah. And there's a good neurological reason why he can't just. Mm-hmm. And so that's the first thing, is to really sort of shift the expectation for parents that teachers are supposed to be the experts on this, because they're not. Mm-hmm. And it's not fair to ask them to, because it's outside of their training and their realm for the most part. And then the second based on that, is to really come to the teacher from a place of compassion and collaboration. Mm-hmm. Like, instead of a lot of parents will come in demanding, my kid deserves this, my kid's right is, and that it's a style of advocacy that sometimes it gets results, but it doesn't build long-term teamwork. And what we really want to be doing is coming to the schools and to the teachers and saying, I get that this is a challenge. We have to accept and understand that these kids, probably about 25% of their classrooms, oftentimes have kids with all kinds of complicated issues. And there are way too many kids in the classroom. And so the pressure on them is outrageous. Like, I have such admiration and respect for school teachers. I don't think I could do every day what they do every day.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So really coming from that perspective of understanding and compassion and that I want to help you be the best teacher you can be for my kid, because I believe that that's your intention. To start with what we call ABI, assume best intention. Well, we want to do that for our kids, but we also want to do that for our teachers, to assume that they're there because they want to see kids in their class be successful and learn, and they love learning. And it's frustrating for them when kids make it hard for themselves or for other kids to learn, So it's really, in the school environment, the beginning conversation is really about shifting expectations to understanding that we're not going to fix this right now. We're trying to learn together to work to manage it and to help this kid learn how to become a lifelong learner. And then the third thing I would say with the schools is to really, really begin to shift the emphasis from focusing on outcomes to focusing on the process. The schools tend to be very outcome focused. We got to get the test results. We got to get the grades. We got to worry about the report. And with our kids, what's really essential, particularly in the younger grades, but really all the way through high school, what's really essential is that they learn how to learn, and that they learn how to put processes in place and structures in place for themselves to learn how to learn. So I would rather hold a kid accountable to, did you study 10 minutes every day, to whether you got an A or a B. Yeah. And that's a very tough place for a teacher to understand, because they are so held accountable to the outcomes.
Wow. Yeah, that's likely the most difficult one, because you're asking a teacher who's likely to be overburdened with work and big classes to now individualize in a way that can be very complicated.
But and I keep saying it's hard. So the other thing I want to say, because I've heard myself say that twice now, is it's also doable. This is not rocket science. This is communication. Mm-hmm. And this is all about understanding human dynamics and improving communication. And it's doable. You really can affect change. You really can teach kids with ADHD to understand themselves, to manage themselves, to self-advocate. And it's essential that we do that, because by the time they get to college, they're going to have to self-advocate. There's not going to be anyone to do it for them. The law requires that they do it for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other piece of this is it's an incredible gift that you're giving your child by working on this. I mean, if you remember when you were diagnosed, the feeling of awesome that comes with finally understanding something about yourself, you're helping your child get that same gift. So I think that's really important. I have the last question on my list is about relationships. And with ADHD, relationships can be hard. How do you talk to parents and their kids around developing healthy, strong, balanced relationships in the context of, the school setting and growing friends?
Well, we talk a lot about relationships, because what we find is that oftentimes when families start to unravel or struggle with managing the ADHD, the first place that gets impacted is the relationships, because the parents and the kids, there's a trust that gets lost. And so when all else fails, and particularly with teenagers, when parents come to us with teenagers that are struggling, we always focus first on the relationship. Go out to lunch, go get your nails done, go to the movies, reconnect with your kid, because that is absolutely essential for them to feel like there's a safe and trusted place for them to be open and for us to be transparent with each other. And then the other piece is, in terms of, because I think you're asking in terms of the relationship between the kids and their peers.
Right.
There are a few things. One is to model healthy relationship dynamics and to stay calm and to learn to collaborate and cooperate and, do all of that at home. Don't be afraid of your kids spending time with their siblings instead of as much time with their peers as you think they should, because there's a lot of great stuff that they learn there. And those are going to be their longest friends in their lives, their longest relationships in their lives. So, and it's very, very common for kids with ADHD to play with kids who are different ages from them, either older or younger. And so understand that that's common, really, really common for kids to play with younger kids. And that's not a problem unless you make it a problem. It's
wow.
really
yeah,
okay.
That's sort of mind-blowing, because that is actually one I didn't even know to ask that question, but it's absolutely what I observe in our own family. Mm-hmm. And I had never, and I'm always thinking about that, is that there is this absence of close, deep friendships in at school or in our community that are of peer age.
Right. And if that's the case, and that's very often the case, all the more reason to cultivate, if you've got siblings in the home, to cultivate sibling relationships and family teamwork and a sense of family togetherness, so that they do learn to establish healthy relationships and what that takes. And there's a lot of, it's important to help our kids develop social skills and to continue to cultivate that. But try not to get stuck in believing that if they're not playing with kids just the same age, that there's something wrong. Right. Our kids are developmentally 3 to 5 years behind their same age peers in some aspects of their development, right? Mm-hmm. That not all of them, and that's where it gets confusing, because cognitively they're usually ahead of themselves very often, and they may be sort of overly mature in some areas and immature in others. And so it's confusing because it's erratic and we don't really know what to expect of them. But if we realize that that's actually normal for them and that will level out, their executive function may or may not level out completely as they become adults. But eventually, from a developmental perspective, they will catch up with their peers. But they may not be doing it at 12 or 14. And I wrote an article once, "What's so wrong with immaturity?" Like,
I love it.
Like, why do we want our kids to grow up so fast? How does that serve them? Really, these kids need the time to process and learn what it takes to self-manage. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take them longer than their peers. And that's okay.
Oh, okay. Story. May I?
Yeah.
Story. It's brief. I had this experience, and I'm so glad you just said that. I had this experience. It was just a couple of weeks ago, and I was watching a movie with my daughter, and it was a beautiful evening, and it was that sort of golden hour of light, and it started to rain. And she said, pause the movie. I said, what's up? She says, I have to go twirl. And she goes out into this golden light, and she takes off her shoes in the yard. And I don't know why I say she takes off her shoes. She doesn't ever wear shoes. She's like a hobbit. And she just starts twirling with her arms out in the rain and letting it fall on her face. And I thought, I don't ever want to lose that. Why am I pushing anything else? This is an incredible gift.
Did you get a photo, Pete?
No, I wasn't ready. I was in awe. I was too busy crying, Nikki. Come on.
I know. You were living in the moment. Good for you. Oh, that is
a snapshot. That's a beautiful thing.
It was enough.
Beautiful.
That was enough.
And we had a similar thing the other night with the rain, where we all, my son, my 15-year-old son, was like, come with me. And we all went and sat on the front porch and just watched the rain.
It's just lovely. Nice. And I feel so much like same age peers. There's so many social issues going on, and so many demands, kind of emotional demands, that you forget how to go outside and twirl. And so you're right. What's so great about
it's the rush?
What's the rush? Go out and twirl.
I have a 22-year-old. Today is my 22-year-old.
Oh, happy birthday.
And she calls it adulting.
Yes. Hashtag adulting.
Hashtag adulting. And adulting is hard.
It is.
Yes.
It is not easy to learn to manage yourself and to get to the doctor and do all the things they're responsible for. And so what's the rush?
So true.
Slow down a little bit. Let them take the time they need to learn to really have confidence with themselves.
I love that so much. And go out and twirl.
I have a question for you that is definitely very relevant in my household right now, and that is around social media. So when you're talking about social relationships, that in today's world definitely is directly related to technology and texting and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of those things. Any advice on how to manage this that is so new to us. I mean, this is not something I ever grew up with. I mean, not even close. So,
well, here's how I look at it. We are digital transplants and they are digital natives.
So true.
Right. And we have this, like, do you feel like yourself, you're way too young to be sounding like your grandparents, right? In my day, right?
Yeah. Ask me as my bursitis kicks up again. Yes. Goodness, I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Well, and and it's so interesting because people will say that, like, well, when you guys were growing up, you never did this, but the world is so different.
Exactly.
Like, I don't think it's a fair comparison because it's just so different.
Well, and that's the thing, is that, like, this is their world. And we can be resentful of it, and we can be judgmental of it, and we can stand with our hands on our hips. And I had a client who told me he just won't get that phone away from his head, you know? And, like, we get all of these judgments around it. And I really do believe, it's not to say that we don't want to have limits on it, but I think that we need to let go of the judgment and let go of the shaming and all of the panic around it, and get real and understand that actually the nature of communication is shifting. And there's some great research on what they are getting and the dynamics that they are learning, and from social dynamics from the social world, and to recognize that they are communicating differently. That doesn't mean we don't teach them how to look adults in the face and have a conversation. That's all important as well. Mm-hmm. But I think that if we let go, if we come from a place of, like, well, this is their world, let's help them learn to manage it in a healthy way, instead of coming from that hand on the hips judgment of, you shouldn't be doing that. There must be something wrong about it.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a really good point.
Because they're going to react and get defensive if we're coming from judgment. But if we're coming from understanding and helping them learn to manage it, well, that's what parents are supposed to do. And, we were mentioning it earlier, I think, that a huge amount of their world is on these screens now. Their schoolwork, their homework assignments, their applications, everything is on the screen. So that's their reality. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so to some extent, we need to meet them where they are and help them learn to grow from there and to manage it well, instead of assuming that there's something wrong with it because it's unfamiliar to us or it's different.
Well, and it's sort of, I can see my family, especially my two kids, saying, well, Mom, you're being kind of a hypocrite.
Hypocritical, right?
Yeah. There you are on your phone and iPad and computer. And, right. I have everything on my iPad. That's how I read a book. And my daughter just the other day was saying, you can go and get an actual book.
Right.
I'm like, wow, you're right. I know. But, it is interesting because when you talk about managing it in a healthy way, one of the things that we told our son when he got his first iPod, which he could text on, is we said, just remember when you're texting something to someone, think about whether or not you would actually say it to their face. Like, would you say this to them? And, kind of just pause for a second and make sure that's the case. And also, because he's, at the time, he was a seventh grader, just 13. I said, also, would you text this and in front of me? Like, is it okay for an adult to see this? Because I will be checking it.
Yeah.
I'm one of those. You have to turn your phone in and I check it. Not all the time. My barometer was always, would you want grandma to see it? Right. Yeah.
Don't say anything you wouldn't want grandma to see. And I'm sure they go beyond that. But, and there is, I agree with you completely. They need to understand that at this point they are being, it doesn't mean you're checking them, but that they have the capacity to be monitored. We own all passwords. They know that it's a privilege. And that they can lose if they're using it irresponsibly. And we have a lot of conversations about using it responsibly, and love to point out when people in the media are using it irresponsibly. My favorite conversations are when people out there do stupid things. Yeah. And we can talk about that, how stupid that was, because that helps my kid see where the boundaries are without it being about him or her.
Right. Yeah.
Right. There's some great stuff in the world right now. There's so much fodder for for pointing out how to not behave in social media. That it's really, you can take the judgment out of it when you're making a dinner table conversation about, somebody else.
That's right. Okay, so I have one last question.
Okay.
With anxiety, I have a child who definitely lives with anxiety, and he gets it from me. So I really relate to what you said earlier in the conversation about me imposing my anxiety on him, because I'm sure that that's true. So any suggestions with the new school year coming up, how to help both of us ease that anxiety of going back to school and just getting back into the routine of all of this?
Well, and I have a lot of anxiety in my house too. I'm right there with you. So I do write a lot about anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about it we have a group coaching program called the Parent Success System. And it's this phenomenal program where you're placed in a small group of other parents of same age kids and a coach. And we talk about different topics every week or every other week. And so we were talking about the topic of transparency. And that's really what comes up to me as you say that, is when we're open and honest about what we're dealing with, and we're not trying to hide or pretend it doesn't exist or make ourselves look good in our kids' eyes. Not only does it cultivate trust with them, but it helps them learn how to manage the issues that inevitably they're going to struggle with as well. Because if we're dealing with anxiety, likelihood they're going to have some anxiety too, most of them. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a big believer in transparency, to be able to say, I get that this is my issue. I know that right now I'm nervous about making sure you have everything you need to get ready for school next week. So I know you've probably got it under control, but would you just humor me and let's go through this list together so that I'll feel better. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to always make it about you. I mean, it's a give and take, but sometimes to just be clear and open and frank and not try to pretend that you're not anxious, right? I mean, I would also say you want to do the work you need to do to try to limit the things that make you anxious. And, that we do a lot of work around shifting that mindset for you so that you aren't as anxious as you're going into a new school year. But kids, just like kids feel fear, kids read emotion. They know if you're feeling anxious. So if you try to pretend you're not, it's not going to fly.
It's so true. Right. It is so true. I have a little quick story to share when you say that.
It was so cute.
So last year, I guess it was towards the end of the year. So my son now is going into 8th grade and he's going to be 14 soon. So this was a 7th grade, 13. And he had asked if he could go after school to play basketball at this park that's just right next to the school. And it was only going to be for like an hour and a half after school. And I'm just like, I don't know. I'm like really this is like the first time I would have let him do anything kind of on his own without like a parent being there. And so I was trying to figure out kind of what the rules were going to be and who was going to be there and all that stuff. And finally, by the end of it all, we got everything worked out. Everybody agreed to what they were going to be doing. He's like, Mom, just don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's like, and you want to be able to sort of trust them with the next step and the next step, so that they can prove to themselves and to you that they can do it, and then they'll take the next step. We were having a conversation. My son's a little bit older, about he wanted to be able to stay home by himself, and we were like laughing because like there's no way you're staying home while we're out of town before you're 18. It's just not going to happen. And he was arguing like, why wouldn't I be able to? And, well, for starters, you don't have a license yet. Okay, well, that's fair. But what he said, and it's very wise, was he said, why would I do anything to mess it up?
Yeah.
If you're going to trust me with it, why would I mess it up? And if you are incrementally giving them a little bit more and a little bit more so that they can handle it, not so much so that they can't handle it, but enough for them to feel successful with it, they want to keep being successful with it. Right? He's smart enough to know he doesn't want to screw this up. Yeah. And so for the most part, he's making pretty good decisions. Is he occasionally going to make a stupid choice? Yes, he's a 15-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. I mean, But if I don't let him do anything, then when he does get some space, he's going to go overboard because he's not going to have learned how to measure it.
That's so true.
Yeah. Well, and in a sign of the times, back to this technology conversation, my son is 10, and he says, "Hey, Dad, can you take me? I need to go get this Lego thing." I said, "Well, first of all, you don't have any money." He said, "Come on, just take me, and then you can get it, and I'll pay you back." Right, whatever, I believe that. But I said, "I can't go right now." And he said, "Come on, can I go by myself?" And I said, "It's like 5 miles away." And his response to me is, "Dad, Uber." He doesn't. What does he know of Uber? He's never taken an Uber. I didn't. How does he learn that? Anyway, so this is our brave new world.
It is,
and thank you.
We have to be brave in it, and that's the button at the end of this. Is that nobody told us that parenting was going to be a cakewalk. It's a brave endeavor,
and I resent them every day for not telling me. This has been such a treat. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure.
Can you please tell us what you want people to do to learn more about you?
Well, I definitely want people to go to ImpactADHD.com and sign up for. We have free gifts on the site or newsletters or whatever appeals to you. But join our community, get on our mailing list. It's all free. It's just an amazing community of parents, and everything we do is about not the what but the how helping you figure out how to put what you're learning into practice on a day-to-day basis. So ImpactADHD.com/gift will get you a good something. Not sure what it'll be at that time you sign up, but it'll always be something good.
Oh, I hope it's a cake.
And then the other thing is for parents immediately, we're doing our back to school special we do every year. It's called backtoschool.com. And this year we're doing a series of videos and culminating in a webinar. Every year it's something different, but every year in August you can look for backtoschool.com and find something great happening. And again, it's all free, and it's designed to get people motivated, to get parents back into the swing, and we're all about cultivating conscious parents. And so, the more you're paying attention and reading emails and listening to podcasts, and thinking consciously about how you're managing your ADHD and your kids' challenges, the better the relationships are going to be and the better the outcomes are going to be for your kids. So join us in any way that works for you. Come play with us and visit us at ImpactADHD.com and backtoschool.com.
That's beautiful. This has been such a treat.
Thank you so much.
I hope this is not the last we hear from you.
We would love to be back. I love this. You guys are fun.
Outstanding.
You're even telling stories, so I don't have to. It's perfect.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Nikki, closing comments from you.
I got to be honest, I feel so much better about this new school year coming up. Seriously, my anxiety is probably gone down at least 3 or 4 notches. So I'm good. This is great.
That's a big win. It's
a huge win.
Yeah.
It's a huge win. Yes.
Take it. Well, this has been a real treat. Thank you so much, everybody, for downloading and listening. On behalf of Elaine, Taylor-Klaus, and Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we will catch you next week right here on the ADHD Podcast.